I'm going to go over in this video how I make a cashmere blanket. Now this one has taken me a few years, but I still use it as a blanket. It is literally the warmest one, and we live in Connecticut where sometimes our power goes out, we don't have heat for a few hours, and this cashmere blanket is like a lifesaver. It'll keep you warm in the depths of Alaska probably. It's very, very warm, very, very soft. What I do is family members, people give me cashmere sweaters. I buy cashmere sweaters like this. It gets to the point where it shrinks too much, or I make a sweater for my children and it gets kind of ripped or continues to shrink, and I continue to make more things out of it, and this is the last resort. So every single one of these are sweaters from family members and friends, and it's such a fun thing to do. And this, I kind of went overkill. As you can see, it is huge, 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 huge. So I hope you enjoy this video and it gives you inspirations. It's definitely a fun project that I like to do, and it's very sentimental.
So this is how I usually put the cashmere blanket on the bed so it looks nice. I fold it and show the part that is finished. Now, I originally made like a patchwork of big sweaters and made it to kind of fit a queen size bed, so it's, I guess, queen size blanket. And I made these little floral clumps out of the sweaters and attach it to the other side. You see once it's flipped over the original patchwork, and I hand stitched the little cashmere flower so you could see, and it gives this like puffy kind of organic look. Here's a little sweater. Actually, it was my sweater and I made it into my child's sweater, and she outgrown it, so it's time to make little flowers from it. So right here, that's like the perfect, I would say, flower bud, the center of the flower. So I'm just going to chop that right off and make that a base for a future flower. Sleeves are perfect for wrapping around the flower bud. Any zippers or buttons with a razor blade, and that kind of works. There's also little tools you can use that are like a razor blade specifically designed for taking off buttons and stitches, but a razor blade works just fine. This is a onesie that, of course, my child has outgrown, and I just take off the buttons and chop it up like I did for the other stuff. Sweaters for adults make like bigger flowers, and you can get more length with those, but it's cute to have a variety of different sizes, because you could have, the bud and then one petal or 2 or 3 or even 4. This little sweater is very sentimental. My in-laws gave it to me for the babies, and it has the cutest little bear. So I kind of like to show little details like that in the buds. So I'm going to make the bear a little bud with a bear inside, and that's going to be the focus flower on today's video. I think it's really nice to show sentiment and to recycle sentimental things, or upcycle rather, into whatever project you're doing. So it just gives a personal touch, and when you look at it, you are just filled with memories of your sweet little babies. The sleeves are pretty perfect. You just kind of wrap them around to make petals around the buds, but this is such a small sweater, so I have to sew up between the sleeves to make something that could wrap around. But usually in an adult sweater, you just use the sleeves. Any other fabric, I wrap it around, and then I sew it in, and then I pull it out. I'll show that later, actually. So here's what I'm talking about. So I sewed in, so you could see the seam, and I'm pulling out the fabric from this like cylinder I created, so it's not going to show any seam at all. And I do that always, so that's a kind of an important step, because you don't want seam showing. Kind of breaks the magic of the blanket and shows the yarn, and I don't think that's a really great. The next part is hand sewing, and hand sewing is really a pleasure. I usually curl up with a cup of tea and watch Gardener's World. There's no machines sounds, it's just you sewing your little sweaters. So back to the bear. That's going to be my outline. I'm going to have the bear as the base and then petals around it. So I'll show you how that's done. One of my friends, who's a very talented professional seamstress, she taught me this really useful trick for doing hand needlework. And basically what you do is you thread your needle and you have the thread the size of from your fingertips to your forearm, to your elbow, the same size as your forearm. And this is like a good indication of the amount of thread you should be using per sewing time you sew. So any more than that, it will tend to get tangled. And this rule of thumb seems to be very useful. And so what I do is I sew the fabric in on itself, so there's like a hem in the back. Sometimes I just use like one point to push everything together, but since I want to show the teddy bear, I'm kind of just being cautious with that and using less. So then the seams are on the back and you see this little teddy bear, super cute. And from here I'm going to flip it over and sew what I call the petal, but it's just basically the cylinder piece of fabric all the way around the back of the bear. Once I'm done going all the way around and stitching it together, I do the next, what I call petal, and it's the same thing, repetition of flipping it over and then sewing this kind of purplish, reddish piece onto the other petal I just made. Once I'm done, I have this 2 petal over this kind of bud. I call them buds, but they're this one's a bear, and it's I find a place where I want it to be. I see how it looks, and then I flip it over, and I'm going to sew the edge of the last petal I just did, the cylinder piece, on the in between. I kind of grab a bit of the blanket and then the previous little cylinder petal piece, and I tack it into place, and I do a knot to make sure it stays, and I sew it all the way through, repeating this. I do a little bit of the blanket, a little bit of the petal, put the needle through a little bit of the blanket, a little bit of the fabric from the previous flower, and then into the flower I just made, and I go maybe 2 times going all the way through, then I knot it 2 times, knot. So I sew as much as I can until I can't really flip it over, and then once I get to a certain point, I have to flip over the petal, and I run into a situation where you kind of do see a little bit of thread coming through, but there's not much you could do about it, or I didn't find a way to eliminate that. And what I do is I eliminate it when I put the next piece of fabric or petal over it. So from here, I want to do it as delicately as possible, so I take a little bit of the petal fabric and sew it against the blanket, going all the way around until it's finished. I layer the pieces of fabric all together, and I tend to alternate each piece, each flower. I like to have different colors matched together. So I have like one color, one sweater is in between as the base, and then around it I have another piece, and it's alternating. And I just keep on adding flowers the way I just showed you. And sometimes I tack them down if they're kind of flopping. So I go through the center and just tack them down. And it's a really fun craft to do on those cold winter evenings, and you're all warm in bed watching your favorite movie. So I definitely hope you enjoyed this video, and please subscribe to my channel if you like to see content like this.